Hey everybody, is this on? Yeah. I'm Austin. I'm on the product team at Offchain Labs. I'm here to talk about the Arbitrum tech stack and why you may want to use it as a developer. I think there's been a lot of talks about launching your own chain, which is possible with the Arbitrum stack, but also want to just touch on the existing rollups that you can launch your app on today without having to worry about just like bootstrapping infrastructure. So Offchain Labs, were the original creators of Arbitrum, one of the first optimistic rollups that has the most TVL of any L2. A few benefits of just like Arbitrum is cheap transactions. The reason why this is possible is just effectively bringing execution off chain, and then only having to validate it on chain if there is a dispute. It's fully trustless. The Even if the sequencer tries to censor you, you can actually force your transaction to be included on L1, and so even if the sequencer wants to be malicious, it cannot steal your funds, and you can always exit back to Ethereum. And it's EVM equivalent, and so porting your app over from L1 or another EVM compatible chain is extremely easy. So Arbitrum is a mature tech stack relative to other tech stacks. We are still, along our decentralization roadmap. It's currently the only stage one general purpose rollup that exists today, according to like the Talix kind of definition and on L2 beat. Um, and so what this means is like there's just less trust assumptions when using Arbitrum tech, and specifically Arbitrum 1. And we can dive into this a little bit. And so if we just zoom in onto this risk profile, we'll see that we have 3 green slices out of 5, and that there's 2 that we're still working on. One is state validation. So right now, validators are permissioned in that like they're whitelisted, and Arbitrum One has around 14 validators right now, and these are a bunch of reputable entities. It's not just Offchain Labs. It's Google Cloud and Consensus, and OpenSea, and the key thing here is that only one of these validators needs to be honest. You don't need a majority or a supermajority to form a consensus. You only need one honest validator that will be able to deterministically prove everybody else is incorrect. Um, while this is not bad, and this whitelisted set of validators can be removed, like new validators can be elected or removed by the Arbitrum DAO, in a way that's permissionless. Uh, this isn't good enough. We want to have permissionless validation, where anybody is able to join the validator set. There's nothing stopping Arbitrum from actually making validation permissionless today. It really just comes down to a single attack vector where it would be prohibitively expensive, but it would be possible to censor the chain for a long time. This is called a delay attack, and so what we've done is develop a new generation of fraud proofs called uh, Bold, which essentially enables permissionless validation. We designed this whole new thing from bottoms up to remove the single attack vector of delay attacks. Uh, Bold has been in development for months. It's currently on a like private devnet, but is going to be opened up on a public testnet quite soon, and we're inviting everyone to come and try and break it and make an invalid assertion, and it should be quite fun. Um, so go back to this other slice of the pie, the exit window, and really refers to upgradability. Right now, Arbitrum has a security council. This security council has the ability to instantly make upgrades to the chain. And so as a user or developer on Arbitrum, you're trusting the security council to act honestly. Um, this security council is made up of entities from all over, like L2B, the Ethereum Foundation, Offchain Labs, and again, can be removed by the DAO. So if the DAO wanted to remove the security council, they could today, and no one could stop them. However, the security council's purpose is to protect the chain in the event of like a worst case scenario where there's a time sensitive bug or exploit in, say, the bridge contract. And so right now, even though the DAO has the power to remove the security council, the trade-offs don't necessarily make sense to remove them. Maybe in 5 or 10 years or less or more, when the protocol has sufficiently hardened, it will make sense to remove the security council. But as of right now, it really does still make sense to have this upgradability path. And something that we're working on that will change the color of this slice is a pause-only security council. And so rather than having the ability to make arbitrary upgrades to the chain, the Security Council will only have the power to pause the chain. And when they pause the chain, then that will give the DAO the ability to act in a more delayed and slower manner to make any fixes or patches that are necessary. The next benefit of using Arbitrum to talk about a little bit is stylus. So stylus is a new way to write smart contracts. It's a new execution environment that has a WebAssembly-based virtual machine. And this WASM VM does not replace the EVM. It runs alongside of it. And what that means is any of these WASM contracts developers can write are fully interoperable with the EVM. And so while many of these alternate VMs that I'm sure many of you have heard of this week replace the EVM, the stylus VM runs alongside the EVM. And what that means is these WASM contracts can make calls directly to a Solidity-based contract and vice versa. And so it really unlocks the superpower of getting the best of both worlds. As a developer, you get to access an efficient virtual machine on an EVM compatible chain that has the liquidity and ecosystem already there. All of these other chains that are replacing the EVM with an alternate VM have to bootstrap their ecosystem and liquidity from zero. And so as a developer, this is extremely powerful. Some of the benefits of stylus, other than that interoperability, is just the ability to write smart contracts in popular programming languages. Anything that compiles down to WebAssembly is compatible. Some languages compile down to WASM better than others, and so we're primarily focused on enabling Rust to start, but also like C and C++, but other languages like Move and Cairo and Go are all theoretically compatible with stylus as well. The other benefit is the efficiency. The stylus execution environment, the stylus runtime, executes its native assembly code much faster than Geth executes EVM bytecode. And that speed of execution translates directly into gas savings. And so what we see is that for computationally intense contracts, contracts that use like a lot of resources and memory, that they're in orders of magnitude cheaper. Computation is often like 100 times cheaper on its own. Memory can be up to 500 times cheaper. When you wrap these up, like the cost has a lot of dimensions, and storage is roughly the same because that transaction data has to get sent to Ethereum either way. And so what we see is that for these computationally intense contracts, like 10x is like is a number that we feel comfortable sharing in terms of what kind of gas savings you can see, which is extremely significant and really just enables new use cases that were not practical in the EVM, but now possible in a way that you can still tap into the EVM's network effects. So that was just like a little overview of the Arbitrum stack overall. Arbitrum 1 which is like the flagship Arbitrum rollup that we're all familiar with. Just a little bit about this, like there's over $11 billion of TVL on Arbitrum 1. Out of like, if you take all of the L2s, including Optimism and Base and ZK Sync, put them all together, Arbitrum 1 on its own has like 45% of the TVL out of all of those chains. We have an entire like just thriving ecosystem. I think we're most known for DeFi and really are the home of DeFi on L2s. And really just have like a nice organic like community of users. I think like just a really noteworthy stat to kind of show how dominant Arbitrum 1 has been in terms of TVL is looking at how much ETH is on the chain. And so like TVL can get skewed by like the chain's native token. So like part of Arbitrum's TVL is the ARB token. A large part of Optimism's TVL is the OP token. And so looking at bridged ETH is kind of a credibly neutral way of seeing the actual like amount of like bridged TVL coming over to the chain. And so like if you look at this graph here, like we're not just putting together like the rollups. We're also including Polygon and Avalanche and Ronin. And if you put all of them together, they're still not coming nearly that close to the amount of ETH just on Arbitrum 1. And so as a developer, if you're building an app that is liquidity dependent, there is really no better spot to build or deploy that app than Arbitrum 1. And if it is liquidity dependent, there's nowhere else that comes really close. Arbitrum Nova is another chain that like Offchain Labs has built. It's lesser known, but essentially it uses an alternative DA while still leveraging the Arbitrum tech stack. And so it's much cheaper fees, and so it's mostly for like high throughput applications, whether that be on-chain games or social projects. And so this just provides another option for developers who are looking for cheap fees but aren't ready to launch their own chain. Launching a chain is really resource intensive. You have to deploy the contracts, you have to bootstrap infrastructure, you have to get users to bridge there. Arbitrum Nova is sort of like a playground for developers that need those cheap fees without wanting to have to deploy their own chain. And so we've seen a lot of teams launch on Arbitrum Nova, and then once they are ready to sort of outgrow that and need their own dedicated block space, that's when they'll maybe move on to launching their own chain. Arbitrum Nova uses an off-chain data availability committee for its data availability layer. And so what that means is you're trusting that this committee makes data available. And while it is an additional trust assumption compared to a rollup, the nice thing about this is that you're only trusting that one member of the committee is being on it, that is available and honest. And so this is the Arbitrum Nova Data Availability Committee today that the Arbitrum DAO is able to elect new members to or remove members of. And so you could say that all like 5 out of 6 of these entities, for whatever reason, want to collude and actually steal user funds. It only takes one to deterministically prove everyone else incorrect. And so this is like while it is an additional trust assumption, we consider it a mild trust assumption, given that the transaction fees are so much lower, like well under a cent. The other nice property of Arbitrum Nova is say rather than the committee is malicious, but maybe they are just offline, or they are just like having issues, they have a bug. If the committee goes offline, the chain does not pause or stop. The chain will actually fall back to being a rollup and posting its transaction data to Ethereum. So in terms of liveness, Arbitrum Nova security is much higher than a typical sidechain. And this brings us to Arbitrum Orbit. So Orbit is our permissionless app chain offering where anybody is able to launched their own blockchain using Arbitrum tech, whether that be as a rollup using Ethereum as the DA layer, any trust where you're using an off-chain data availability committee, or if you want to plug into Celestia, EigenDA, or Avail. Um, so Arbitrum Orbit, like you can launch as an L2 or an L3. Importantly, um, it's permissionless to do so. There's a slight difference. Like as an L3, you can do this for free. As an L2, you're just sharing a small portion of your net sequencer revenue to sort of align with the Arbitrum DAO and support like the continuation and development of the technology. And yeah, like it's really important that developers have this option too, because I think if we're really going to scale um, to a mainstream audience, applications that are going to use a large number of on-chain transactions are not going to find the throughput they need on an existing chain that they're sharing block space with. And so half of the problem we're trying to solve with Orbit is this dedicated throughput. But the other half, I would say, are the customizations and control you have over the Orbit chain. And so we're seeing a lot of teams just really leveraging this like full customizability of their Orbit chain, whether it be to have a custom gas token, whether it be to add custom precompiles, to maybe change the gas fees and sponsor user transactions, to just really like customize the throughput as well. If they want to raise the hardware requirements for running a node, they can increase the TPS of their chain. It's 100% in their control. And so this is just a little bit about like the hierarchy. Like I think there's been some misunderstanding, maybe because of like the how Orbit began, but Orbit chains can work as an L3 or as an L2, and importantly, Orbit chains can be launched as an L3 on other L2s other than Arbitrum. If you want to launch an L3 on a different optimistic tech stack, it's totally possible, and we've actually seen some demand for this, which has been great to see. Um, this is just like a snapshot into the sort of like upcoming ecosystem of Orbit chains. This picture is honestly like quite outdated at this point. We have like just so many that have publicly announced already, and so many more in like development that haven't been announced yet. A big one that we just signed recently was Ape Chain. So like the Yuga Labs Bored Ape community and ApeCoin just held a governance vote to decide what tech stack to launch Ape Chain on, and Arbitrum won that, and it's going to be super exciting to see what they can do with their chain as an L3 on top of Arbitrum, and working with them to really ensure the success of that. And so the kind of main point being that like this ecosystem of Orbit chains is really starting to form. And it's been a lot of fun to see what customizations that each of the chain uses. And so just to like I guess wrap this up, these are some of the tech stack features of Arbitrum Orbit, like fully functioning fraud proofs, like out of the box. Like there's a lot of chains that promise like that this is coming soon, but for Arbitrum, this works today, and very soon it won't be permissioned; it will be permissionless to actually dispute state transition as a validator. Um, the block times are also a huge benefit of the Arbitrum stack. Like a lot of competing stacks, their block times are 2 seconds and sometimes 1 second. This may not sound like a big difference, especially as a DeFi user. This doesn't feel like that big of a deal, but for many use cases, such as gaming or like wanting to leverage like or Web 2 users who are used to Web 2 response time, a couple seconds is a long time to wait. And so having that cut down to a quarter of a second is a huge UX boost in terms of getting that like soft confirmation for your user. Um, block production is also like if as a new chain, if you're bootstrapping activity, your chain will actually only produce blocks when there are transactions. And so this really like cuts down on costs. If you are not like say you're not producing 4 transactions a second and you don't need blocks 4 times a second, it's not like the chain will just produce empty blocks and post them to L1. That would be wasteful. And so like the block times on Arbitrum chains are really elastic, and so it will form the amount of activity you have on your chain. In terms of DA solutions, like I mentioned, AnyTrust, which is the Off-Chain Data Availability Committee. This has been in production with Arbitrum Nova for over a year and is one of the most battle-tested solutions that is ready today. A few benefits of AnyTrust too are like, well, one, you can have a custom gas token, and so you can really accept like gas fees in whichever token that you would like. And secondly, are fast withdrawals. Um, Given that you're already trusting the data availability committee, you can actually extend the responsibilities of them to attest to the validity of those state transitions. And so if you extend those responsibilities of that committee, you can enable withdrawals that bypass the 7-day challenge period and enable withdrawals in the same time as L1 finality, so 15 minutes. And this is a feature that like we're really excited about. Um, and then again, like the execution environment, it's not EVM or the stylus VM, it's both. So you get with any Arbitrum chain, you get the EVM. Like Solidity developers don't have to even think about the stylus VM. But if you are a Rust developer or a C developer, you can leverage stylus and write extremely efficient smart contracts that just simply would not be feasible in the EVM. And then lastly is just like governance. Like um, every chain controls its own destiny. You're not governed by Arbitrum. You're not governed by the Arb token. You're not governed by the DAO. You have full control over your orbit chain, and no one has any say in how you would like to proceed with your chain. And so yeah, the Arbitrum tech stack, whether you're a developer looking to deploy on an existing chain, such as Arbitrum One or Arbitrum Nova, or launching your own chain with Arbitrum Orbit, like the possibilities are completely endless. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I believe that is the end of my presentation.